Everyone, Tom Swales here, Advanced Movement Therapist. If you are suffering from chronic groin pain or groin strains, I think I have a solution for you. If you're one of those athletes who keep kind of getting that recurring groin pain kind of deep right in the hip there, and you've been using this foam roller, lacrosse ball, nothing's kind of really sorting it out, well, it could be a capsule restriction. So we've got this big ball and socket joint that is the hip, and sometimes by sleeping in various ways or getting into movement habits that are not really conducive to the hip capsule, it might be kind of tightening up one side of the capsule and allowing it to shove or get kind of pushed to one end. And then the groin muscles are trying to hold on to the pelvis a little bit tighter to try and stabilize. So what we're going to do is we're going to utilize a band. You're going to get one of these large loop bands. You're going to get it around the hip here. Bring it right just below that greater trochanter. So that outer hip bump there, get it up nice and tight. So the closer to the joint, the more control that we can have with regarding to localizing that energy and that mobilization. So we're going to get into this open half kneel position. So the band's coming across the groin area here. I've got my left leg pointed towards the wall. And I'm going to lunge. So it's kind of like in fencing. They do this kind of open lunge position. But the band is stretching and mobilizing. So it's taking that ball in the socket and opening it up into the inside here. Now, if I can get a better glide in the hip joint, the groin muscles, the adductors, potentially have less work to do to try and control that hip. So we're going to free up that hip capsule with 10 to 15 reps here. And what we can also do is we can play with some rotation. So I'm going to internally rotate the hip a little bit to get a little bit more different of a glide. So we're going to open up kind of that anterior medial part of the hip capsule. Okay, so we get in there, we feel a nice stretch, there should be no pain. And then we can move it all the way around, get it underneath that glute to open up the front part here. So we want that ball and socket to glide easier forward so that the groin, the adductors, hip flexors, and everything in that area that could be causing pain work less hard. Now that we've created some new input and awareness around that hip joint, we want to start activating the muscles to start gaining control of that new range. So we're going to go into a jackknife half lateral lunge position. I'm going to place my elbow on the floor. I'm going to put my left hand behind my head. So we're going to focus on that right groin. Now here, try and think about lifting up that right leg up off the ground. So we're going to try and think about doing this so we get those abductors to really fire up, to get the adductors to relax a little bit better. So think about lifting up that right leg. If you can't, that's okay. And then we're going to add on some thoracic rotation in the opposite direction. And then relax each time. So lift the leg, inhale, lift that elbow. The reason we are adding on this thoracic rotation is rotation to the left of the thoracic spine goes with abduction with the right leg. So when we're cutting to the left, we're pushing off that right leg, we get rotation that has to occur with that to get that upper body involved. But if we can't rotate through that T-spine, so that energy could end up forcing the groin to work harder and have to push to control the pelvis and the thorax. So we're going to get those integrated again with one another. So I'm lifting that right leg, little spasm there, that's okay. And I'm just breathing. And we can sit here and hold this for 3 to 5 breaths and then bring it back down. Now on the other side of the hip, we want to work on the short range of those adductors. So cross that left leg over top of the right, get nice and set in the ribs, press the floor away. And we're going to work on some isometric strength of the adductors in the inner range. So once we stretch something, we are essentially lengthening and destabilizing it. We're kind of shutting it down, but we want to make sure that we have strength and control in that inner and outer range. So we're going to stay here and even just play with some rotations because the adductors do rotate the hip and they're more of an internal rotator, but they do work in a little bit of flexion and extension. They do assist with that. So we're going to sit that there. I'm pressing this top leg into the floor, so I'm kind of scissoring the leg so the adductors are working on that left leg as well. And we're going to hold for 3 to 5 breaths or 30-second count if you can. Now that we have some isolated strength and control around that hip joint, we're going to add in a little bit of cross cord as well as some contralateral loading through a crawl pattern. Now, my favorite crawl pattern to use is a commando crawl, where I'm pushing and opening up the groin and the hips. So you can see I'm in this lengthened out position, okay? But I'm only lifting myself a couple inches off the floor. So I'm picking myself up. So I'm right here, my left adductors have to work. I'm picking up that right leg and left arm, placing it back down. So that right hip that we were working on now has to fire up in that lengthened position, has to extend, and then internally rotate the hip. And then coming backwards, I gotta pull. So I'm pulling that right hip back in. So now I'm working the adductors into flexion. Then of course we have to get into standing, because we have to teach the foot and the hip and everything, and the kinetic chains start working with one another. So we're gonna focus on that right hip. I'm going to set my butt back, core is on, gripping the ground with the foot. We're gonna do little fire hydrants. So we're opening up that hip, we're rotating through the pelvis. Those deep hip glute rotators have to kick on with the foot. And I'm coming back in. Play with the angle here to see where deficiencies might be lying. And really focus on the foot, okay? If we grip the ground with the foot, it reflexively turns on the deep hip rotators, and that'll help the groin out. They'll help out those adductors to not have to work so hard to try and control the pelvis. So we're set, grip the ground with the foot, lift, stay here and hold for a bit. And whatever you feel burning up, this could be a foot issue. If you feel the foot burning, then that's probably the area of weakness. If you feel the glute burning, that might be the area of inhibition or weakness. So note what you're feeling, and if you're feeling the foot, you might need to do a little bit more foot strengthening exercises, and we have videos for that as well. Then of course, we want to start moving into that frontal plane and using that abduction, adduction of the hips like we want to in sport. So we can start to push with that hip abduction. Now watch when you do this, we don't want to see any teetering. Lock this down, push, push. So I'm driving my shoulder forward in the direction. I don't want to see this, because now that's just all hip. We move as a unit, and we push off with the toes, and we collect with the toes. As you get a little bit more proficient, we add in some hops. Okay, so we start adding a little bit more ballistics, a little bit more control. Here, we can go some larger hops. Here, explode, explode, and off you go. So at our clinic, we love using the balance beam to kind of assess and teach clients how to feel where they may be losing control in their lateral movements or forwards and backwards. And what this will also pick off is if there's any foot deficiencies or any ankle control issues, as we move through the frontal plane, this can help expose that. So not only is this an evaluation tool, but it's a teaching tool for the client, and it can start to really look at where the weak link is in the kinetic chain. If you found this video helpful, share, like, and subscribe. If you are looking for more solutions to help self-assess and create more self-awareness through self-assessment and fix your own orthopedic issues, head over to tomswells.com, or head over to my YouTube channel. Or if you're a clinician who's looking to organize and systematize your practice to better utilize the tools that you have for greater effectiveness, head over to amtcertified.com and get certified today.